Yes, it's Hollie's Hotspurs back with another one. Chatting all things Tottenham, we're second to none. Special guests every time, if it's win, lose or draw. The passion is high like Harry Kane when he scores. Or when Lloris makes a world-class save. We got Højbjerg running the mid every game. Settle down, stick around, share your thoughts with the panel. And make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Coys.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Hollie's Hotspurs Live, where tonight, ladies and gents, we have a win to dissect and discuss, which is lovely. I'm really looking forward to it. And with me tonight to do so, I am joined by two fabulous guests. First of all, I'm joined by Becky. Becky, it's so nice to have you on the channel once again. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I've got no blinds on my patio windows, so I can't do anything about the sun, I'm afraid. The clouds might come over. It was biblical raining this morning, and now it's like this, and I can't see. So apologies for that, but you can hear me. Well, that's okay.
It's all good. Like I say, it's nice to have the sunshine out at the moment, so take it while we can. But no, it's good to have you on again, Becky. And I'm also joined by Jay. Jay, how are you this evening?
That's all right, on super sub duties as always. It's nice to come on to talk about a win. That's where I come on to talk about quite a lot of wins. It must be a good omen, maybe, but I'm not sure. But yeah,
no, it's good. It's good to have you on. Like I say, it's weird you being in the other room, but there we go. But yes, welcome to everybody else that's joining as well. We've got Ross, that is a channel member in about, and we do also have Bobby. So welcome everybody else that's filtering through as well. But let's crack on with it because we have got a lot to dissect. First of all, Becky, I'll come to you because obviously last week, it wasn't so great as we obviously drew to Everton. I mean, a point's a point, but still, we really wanted to get more from that game. So going into this one, knowing exactly where Brighton stood in the league, how did you kind of feel going into it?
Well, I didn't speak to a single person before the game who thought we were going to get anything out of it. And, I'm fairly positive. Those of you that know, it takes me 4 hours to get to a game, and I go to all the home games in as many ways as I can. And I'm quite positive. So to drive all that way and be like, I'm not really sure what we're going to do. I wasn't particularly hopeful. I thought we'd like snatch a draw. People I was speaking to around were saying we're going to get absolutely hammered because I think it was the week before Brighton had the most shots on target, or certainly shots. And, they play with such an expansive, open sort of style that, us Spurs fans are so desperate to play that, people were quite worried. I was at the Everton game, very bizarre sort of game where once we scored, we just sort of stopped playing. Not hopeful, but always sort of, you never know what you're going to get for Spurs. I said this before, but not many people were optimistic.
No, and I think when we did the show last week as well, when we did the preview for it, we were all kind of on the same boat. We were kind of like, I don't really know what we're going to get anymore because, like you say, it all just went to pot in that Everton game. I mean, before we come to Jay, I just want to say a big thank you to Catman Jess. Thank you so much for your super chat. I am doing well, so thank you very much. Also, Jay, so I'll come to you. Obviously, I think your kind of thoughts are the same in a sense that obviously we drew to Everton. It was a bit of an annoyance the way it happened. And then when you see Stellini's bringing out an unchanged team, what were your kind of thoughts then when you saw that?
It was kind of, I was worried about the game because of what it probably meant for our season, realistically. And I think a lot of Spurs fans, like Becky's kind of alluded to, was pretty worried about what the result could mean. So therefore, being Spurs fans, we were extremely pessimistic, predicting a loss. So when we lost, it didn't hurt as much, maybe. But yeah, to see the unchanged 11, and obviously with Everton, how we threw that game away, it just didn't fill anyone with confidence. And I've spoken to you, Hollie, about this. Conte's gone, but we're playing the same 11 every week, and the style of football is not that much different. And it's like, I'd love to see the terms and conditions of this sacking, because I'm really intrigued as to what's happened. Because when you break up with someone, you don't go out with their best mate straight after, who has exactly the same views and everything as them. You go for something new or someone that you trust. So I don't understand why Ryan wasn't given it temporarily. I understand we're frustrated with not having a real manager, but I don't understand. So all of the worry and disappointment Spurs fans had before, it's just carrying on now, really, because nothing's changed apart from the manager.
I think also Stellini said in his press conference, didn't he, that we can't change it. We've got too many injuries. And I think that's when people were like, that was the whole point of getting rid of Conte, is that we hoped there would be some sort of change in formation and change in personnel maybe. And he's sort of coming out in press conferences saying, no, we can't change it, things the way they are. And, you know, Danjuma's still tweeting. I said to someone in the ground, it's very much like when Basuma started. It's almost like something in their contract. Basuma's constantly putting stuff out on the socials and then doesn't start. Richarlison was putting stuff on his socials, doesn't start. And Danjuma does exactly the same thing, doesn't start. And it's all of it. I think that's where the kind of, not hopeless, but the kind of lack of optimism was there on Saturday, because if you have a press conference where he sort of says, yeah, we're going to mix it up a bit and we might see some changes, then there's some kind of positivity. But because he came out and said he wasn't going to make any, we just thought we were going to get absolutely battered.
And I think that's the thing, where Brighton was so high flying at the minute and the way they play their football, it's almost like that's the way we kind of want to play our football, but we're kind of locked in this sense of, again, no change. And obviously I joked about last week having a new manager bounce, but it's evident that isn't the case. But back to this game, because obviously the game does start, and the one man that's obviously had a lot of questions over his head in recent weeks, or this season even, with his performance, is Sonny. So Becky, I'll come to you, because he was the man to obviously make things happen, and what a wonder strike it was.
Yeah, you know, those people who follow me know that I'm one of Sonny's biggest fans, and I've spent all season sort of defending him. I thought he looked freer on Saturday. He seemed to be sort of more like the old self, where he was sort of roaming about a lot more. Now, don't get me wrong, Spurs went amazing on Saturday, and possibly it did paper over some of the cracks, but Brighton are a difficult side, and we came away with 3 points, so there's positives there. But he looked freer. You know, the goal is such a Sonny type of goal. You know, to whether it be on his left or on his right, you know, to kind of outside the area, as Jack said, a speciality goal, curling it in, and the sound, and you know, he often scores those goals in the South Stand. So to score it early on in the first half in 10 minutes is how we want to be. The difficulty is we don't then kick on from that. You know, to score in the first half, we haven't done that. There's been so few times we've done that this season. Yeah, it was a wonderful goal. And to be fair, considering I'm someone who, you know, is so keen on Sonny, I didn't realise that he was on 99 Premier League goals. I knew he was when he'd overtaken Sheringham and all things like that. And then they announced it straight over the tannoy, you know, with his 100th Premier League goal. You know, to be the first Asian player to do that as well. But he looked really hungry for it on Saturday. So hopefully that he kicks on now. Yeah,
definitely. And like you said, I don't know what it is, Jay, because obviously, like Becky said, that goal was Sonny of old. That's the Sonny we've all known and we all love. What do you think it is that hasn't really been the thing that's been pushing him on this season? Could it be the tactics wise, do you think?
It could be. He's kind of been asked to do everything. You know, when you're a winger, you want to kind of attack and you want to score goals, and you don't want to do a lot of the hard running. And you know, that front three are having to create everything themselves essentially. And obviously that can be extremely frustrating. There's been, you know, many games where, you know, the front three have created something and then the defence have thrown it away, and that's disheartening. And then, you know, the minute one of our attacking players does something sensational, we drop back into a negative mindset, and then it null and voids. So in the way that I think Sonny had kind of like, what's the point? Like, I'm not what's the point? I think that's the wrong term to use, but you know, I could do these things of brilliance, but it's only going to come back to bite us anyway. And I won't lie, when I watched it live and he cut inside, I thought he was just going to like shank wide, or it's going to like roll along the floor and like just go straight to the keeper, just because of how it's been recently. And to see that, and it was like, oh, okay. And like you, like Becky said with the 99 goals thing, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. We spend all of our time slandering this guy, and he's still there. And obviously we're still playing negative football, but you know, all of the players at the minute are essentially playing to prove to whoever takes over in the new season that they're the boy, you know, and that they're going to be in the team. And like
he said in his post-match interview, didn't he, to Spurs play, that he was, he was kind of coming in his translation, but he was basically sort of saying, yeah, I have to play in that position. That's where they told me to play. And I have to keep the wing backs 1v1. And then he's sort of saying on Saturday, I didn't do that and I played somewhere else. So he's kind of almost saying, I want to play like the old way. And it's just, you know, it's interesting. Perisic is the one that assists to him, but I've said many times that I don't think Perisic and Son work that well together.
No.
It's forced Son in field. It's forced Son to play with his back to goal, and they're just not what he's used to. He's used to when it's pinged over the front and he runs at speed, or he's got makes space for himself. So it's just interesting that Perisic actually was the one that passed it to him. But it was great. Like I said, it was. I've been so lucky this season with the things I've seen in the stadium. I was at the City game for Kane, and I saw Sonny's 100 goal. It's just there have been some memorable moments this season. There just hasn't been enough of them. But we're still fifth.
We are, and I think that's the thing. I think that's the most irritating thing. That yes, we've got these amazing players, and it's amazing for Sonny to obviously be the first Asian person to do it. It's just again, what else have we got to show for it this season? Which is what you say. It's been so inconsistent. And talking about inconsistencies, Jay, I'll come to you for this one. It's because McMahon scores, and I probably butchered his name, but he scores.
Yeah.
And again, it's Dyer, the man that again throws away a silly pass, and I hate to obviously dig out Dyer week in, week out, but I can't stop myself anymore because I can't give the man any more excuses.
We're talking about clauses in people's contracts. There's definitely one in Eric Dyer's for him to start every week. Don't get me wrong. At the minute, sadly, we're in a catch-22. If we don't start Dyer, who do we start? Is the problem we're in, because Davinson Sanchez is an excellent replacement, as we're all aware. But no, yeah, I obviously I was, when it went in, I was a little bit like maybe, and the fact that I think the fact that the linesman gave it kind of went in our favour, because the problem is with VAR and handballs this year is where they've made the rule, it's the shirt line. Well, but if I wear my shirt up here and I've got, it's like he kind of like touches it here and then it falls to him and he scores. And I think if his arm wasn't out and his arm was in and it just hit him and fell for him and he scored, I think the goal would have stood. But I think the fact that he had the arm out is what they've looked at. I still don't.
We were lucky. We were lucky. Watching it live in the stadium, it was very much sort of, we've been opened up here, and this is what we expected Brighton to do to us. And bearing in mind, I said the other day, we were lucky that we scored first at Everton. We scored first at Brighton. If we hadn't scored first at Everton, we'd have lost. There's no two ways about it. We'd scored first on Saturday. To me, where I was, it felt like he motioned, and like the discussion about whether it was here or here, he makes a motion to do that, to kind of almost like catch it. And yeah, but if it had been given equally, everyone was just standing still, really flat-footed, and we just looked like we have all season, really, just not very solid in defence. And I agree, Jay, with Sanchez, bringing Sanchez on against Everton in a left position for Longley, the first thing he did with his foot was kick it out because he's not left-footed. So Sanchez is Dyer's replacement. If Dyer starts, then it's we've got Romero fit and Longley, and we kind of go from there. And it was interesting that Sanchez doesn't come on this week. He brought Tanganga on, didn't he? So maybe there are some subtle changes there.
Maybe. I think that's the thing. I think although it was annoying, obviously if you're a Brighton fan, you didn't want it to obviously go in our favour, but unfortunately that VAR decision was probably the right one. It was just, again, us creating our own problems with Eric Dyer. I mean, as soon as he gives the ball away, he decides to keep everybody else on side, which is another thing for me because he was sitting deep. And a bit like Darren says, Dyer plays the game, and the second he only knows what is in front of him, he does not know what is behind him, the side of him. I think that's kind of true in a sense that he's not very good at looking around his shoulder either. And I think that's why he was caught out of position. And then from there, Becky, we kind of go into panic stations, because there was a moment where Højbjerg decides he was going to dribble the ball out, even though he's invited 3 Brighton players onto him. And then it goes out for a corner, and it all kind of goes a bit to pot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I can't remember. Did they hit the post before that or after that?
So, yeah.
Caicedo hit the post,
Yeah, so they had that where it kind of came out and then it went over to the corner flag, didn't it? Came back in, and then Reece made kind of like the fingertip save. But yeah, you're talking about the goal now.
Yes, the goal. Sorry.
Yeah. So Dunk, who's the tallest player on the pitch by an absolute mile, has nobody marking him at all. And we're all going, who's marking him? Who's marking him? Oh, he's the guy who heads it in. And the other thing as well is, like, by the time Lloris actually gets anywhere near the ball, he's behind the goal line as well. So Lloris's positioning isn't great. I was a bit disappointed on Monday that Lloris started. I've had this conversation with a lot of people. I know he's captain and all of that, but Forster, I thought, had really, kind of made the position his own. We'd had some kind of, don't get me wrong, we haven't had amazing and we've been conceding goals, but he had more of a presence, I think, with Lloris, and he's better at playing out from the back. So yeah, there were times on Saturday where Lloris didn't really kind of command his box. Granted, he made that save beforehand, but once, like I said before, once we scored, we just went back to type, and we were playing deeper and deeper and deeper, inviting Brighton onto us again. And the goal was kind of inevitable. It's a shame it came from a set piece, because we have improved on set pieces this season. But yeah, it was a textbook kind of header. He hit it with a lot of power, but there was nobody on him. And then it felt like about 5 minutes later they had another one, and this time Skip was marking him. Well, he's about 1.5 foot taller than Skip, so they were, like I said, it was kind of coming. Brighton probably deserved it. They deserved to go in at least 1-1 half time.
And that's the thing. I think that's the thing that's really annoying. All of us fans can see that he's the biggest player on the pitch. We've just left him to do his own thing. And Jay, do you think that's because obviously we can't seem to get the basics right in defending, as it seems? But to me, it felt like they were doing zonal marking, and it clearly is not working with these types of players.
The biggest hater of zonal marking from corners on planet Earth. I know it sounds. Don't get me wrong, I know we went through a year or two of Eriksen hitting the near post every time with a corner, but 99% of people can put it in the box every time. So you don't need, 4 players defending the near post area because, they might make a near post run. The likelihood of going man for man and then the ball meeting the man that's beaten your defender and he happens to head it in is a lot more likely than you just standing in your zone and hoping that no one heads it in around you. Dunk's run wasn't straight either. He started in the middle of the 18-yard box, curved around the back. No one picked him up. No communication whatsoever. Lloris's biggest defender as always, but I am going to have to agree with Becky. He was pretty much touching the back of the net before the ball even got to the line. So I don't know what he was doing. But yeah, it's just frustrating. And this goes back to what we were saying about Sonny and the confidence the attacking players have in the guys behind them to get the job done. They're creating all this amazing talent going forwards. And then it's just like, well, it don't matter because we're going to have to score 4 to because we're going to concede 3, But yeah, it's just the basics. And we can't, if we want to be a team in the upper echelons, we can't afford to do that. And other teams are going to look at it as well. Other teams are going to look at it and we're going to see the bigger players, normally who would be stood in the box, attacking corners, waiting on the edge of the box and making a run for the ball. Because it's a lot easier to do, if the corner taker goes, right, I'm going to put it here, make sure you run onto it, unless someone's on you, you've got a full, uninterrupted run. And then obviously the power you can get on the headers much more. But it's just frustrating. It's just frustrating. It's Sunday League stuff. It really is.
And that's the thing. It's the basics. And although we say these defenders aren't great, but you expect them in the Premier League to be able to do a job. And we clearly can't do that, especially from corners. And obviously we go into the half at 1-1 and then the second half begins. And Brighton have some great build-up play. And Becky, once again, it seems that VAR was beckoning our call. Now, I'm not saying it was the wrong decision because as you see with the Welbeck shot, it does actually hit McAllister. But that being said, again, it was just proving signs that Brighton were getting themselves back into this game.
Yeah, they started much better than we did. And like you said, they play it very quick, very kind of quick one-touch football, the sort of football that we want to play. And at times, when we are on the front foot, we can do. I can remember like City last season away in games like that, we can do it. And then, the shot came through. And the thing from where I was is Romero puts his hands up straight away and does this almost like immediately. But when you watch it back, because obviously we don't see the replays in the stadium, when I watch it back the day after, when you sort of see it does hit him and he does kind of turn, it's unlucky, but it is handball. We were thinking the same before, there's been all this kind of backlash about the decisions. Spurs are very often on the end of wrong decisions. I can remember Sheffield United game when Moura got fouled onto the ball and that was handball. And, let's not start about Sissoko in the Champions League final. There's plenty of situations where we can remember, even this season, where there was the handball at the West Ham game. It didn't matter, we won the match. But there's been times this season, last week at Southampton, the Sarr penalty was ever so harsh. So I'm not saying it's a leveler, but I did say to the person next to me in the stadium, I was like, Brighton fans will think it's like big club, little club. They'll think it's a situation where the little clubs, so-called little clubs, don't get the decisions. But in that sense, I thought it was not handball, but it does hit him. Maybe McAllister can't get out of the way, but it was what it is. The other thing that underlines that for me is Lloris's positioning for that wasn't brilliant either, and it went completely underneath him. So, there's a situation there where he's kind of, it doesn't matter. But if that had stood, that's not great keeping either.
No, and that's the thing. I think it goes back to what you said about Forster, the fact that he was probably unlucky in the sense that he was shafted out. Because Jay, obviously with you and your keeping, and I know you are Lloris's biggest defender, but for me, I feel slightly more confident when Forster has it at his feet than when Lloris does, and that's kind of a worrying sign.
Yeah, and just to go back to the goal, every time every fan channel for every club in the Premier League has this discussion, it's only, I would say, 95% of the time about handballs. It's always about handballs, these discussions, and I don't know how they can change it, because like you said, McAllister's turned away, it hits his hand, it's not intentional, he's not like gone, oh, I'm going to tap this in and put it under Lloris. He's just turned away from the shot like anyone would, and the fact that it hits him and goes in, my question is if Lloris caught that, or there was a scuffle and it stopped going through or whatever, would the ref have given handball for a free kick? It's obviously not, because it's not, it's that rule that they really need to look at, the handballs, because it's just coming up every week and no one knows where they stand.
The thing about the handball going forward is that the rule is it's not supposed to be intentional. But I have this conversation with my husband all the time. Nobody in the box intentionally handballs it.
No.
So why use the phrase intentional? Because unless you're trying to intentionally handball it to score, you aren't going to try and, and there's no way there McAllister wanted to get handball, did he? He's trying to get out of the way.
Yeah.
He didn't motion his arm to motion it in. He's just literally turned and hit him. And that, I can remember times with Dyer's. Remember when Carroll headed it onto him when Dyer wasn't even looking? Oh. There's been some proper dodgy ones. So I don't buy into this whole thing, it's just Spurs. I don't agree. It should be, I know it fills airtime and it's great, but at the moment, it shouldn't be having as many headlines as it is. It was harsh, and like you all just said, either of the two handballs, if they'd been given as goals, then I don't think many people would have argued. But VAR is
on the Forster Lloris thing. I totally understand from the club's perspective why they would play Lloris. Like Becky said earlier, club captain, he's been out injured. But I have to agree that Forster's played really well, and the ball goes back to the goalie, and I don't absolutely crap my pants,
that was audible in the ground at half time. I think there was one where he was going to play it out, and there was so much groaning that Lloris then does this, and then they do like a kick, and there's this ironic cheering going on, thinking, Christ, we should all just manage the club.
I can't remember what game. No, it was the Everton game in the week. I just finished 6-a-side with my mates, and we were watching it in the pub, and I think the ball went back to Lloris, and he controlled it, and then I saw the Everton player on the edge of the 18-yard box, and I was like, right, cool, you've got a good 3-4 seconds here to look where you're going to pass it, and he just waited and waited. And then the Everton player's on his 6-yard box about to close him down, and he passed it out for a throw in, or passed it to the byline to one of our defenders. And it's just you're not helping yourself here, and you're not helping people like me that have defended him for years. It's he looks really shaky, and it's ironic that it came against Brighton as well, because obviously Brighton is the game that a lot of Spurs fans put down to the game that changed Lloris, which is since he had that injury and landed on the peg at the back of the goal. Ever since then, he's never been the same player, and he's never had that confidence. And I don't know how that affects his ball playing ability, because obviously it's got nothing to do with his feet. But it's just he's not oozing confidence, and that's not what you need from your captain at all.
No, definitely not. And obviously after that, Becky, we then see a scrap on the sideline. I'm not telling you, it's like an episode of EastEnders. It had it all this game. What do you kind of make of everything that kind of went on? Because obviously you were in the ground at the time. Yeah,
so where we were in the South Stand, they're about to take the free kick. And I remember thinking it was Dyer or Perisic, somebody will know. But I remember thinking, getting ready to take a free kick, it's curling in. And the ball came in, and I think somebody fouled Matoma or somebody, and it just kind of stopped. But behind the free kick taker, I could just see this melee, very Conte-esque kind of melee, like at the AC Milan game and the Sporting game, Chelsea game. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? But I didn't really notice Stellini But then watching it back, obviously the cameras didn't notice it much because they were watching the free kick. And then when they kind of switched to it, quite a lot of it had already gone on. But I'd sort of seen it at the start. Yeah, and Stellini wasn't doing anything, was he? There's that kind of like, it's almost turned into a GIF now where he turns into the camera and he's kind of like, I wasn't doing anything. And then
There's
we heard
some good
that
ones on Twitter of that.
Yeah, and that they heard that he was then sent off because they were both sent off because neither manager could control their coaching staff. Which, you know, considering Conte didn't get banned for the kind of strictly dancing handshake with Tuchel, I can't imagine that Stellini will get banned because somebody, hopefully with some sense, will watch that back and go, yeah. But if that's the rule, and that's the rule, it was bizarre because normally those incidents happen like in a break of play, don't they? Or there's been like a tackle, like Romero at AC Milan, or there's been some incident leading up to it, but it was literally just a bog standard curling free kick, and then beyond is all this. But like I said off air, I didn't realise that Stellini and De Zerbi had kind of issues before kickoff. I didn't see that, and then watching it back when they're shaking hands and De Zerbi's kind of pointing his finger, and then apparently it's comments on in terms of the press conferences. But you know, aren't we done with like angry Italian managers? I thought we'd kind of gone past that. And, you know, it's like, is it really helpful? Do we need that kind of passion? Not sure it massively helps. But De Zerbi's got previous, hasn't he? You know, he spent most of this season not actually on the touchline.
It was just a bit bizarre, like you say, like it just came from nothing. And Jay, I think like Becky said at the start with the whole bit with them with the handbags, it kind of fed into what might have happened during the game. I mean, with that happened at the start, do you think that was kind of escalated with little comments here and there along the touchline as the game went on?
Well, didn't Stellini say that Brighton's success is down to Potter? I think is the comment that really sparked De Zerbi, and I can understand like does that need to be said? I don't know. It is De Zerbi probably reading into it too much, maybe. And I do think it goes back a little bit to the big club, little club thing, you know. Oh, Spurs are saying, oh, we're little Brighton and Potter did everything and I'm this, I'm that. And obviously a lot of Spurs fans were wanting this guy before what happened at the weekend. Whether they still want them now, I don't know. His football is still nice, that doesn't change. But yeah, you know, Stellini was pictured to be like Gargamel from Smurfs. You know, I know he looks like him, but it's like, you know, he wasn't a villain in that scenario. But like Becky said, if it's the rule, it's the rule, and you know.
But also, if it's the rule going forward, and every time there's any melee on the touchline, then every man, both managers are going to get taken. I can imagine Klopp does that sort of thing.
It's the same as surrounding the referee with the players, you know. And I know the Arsenal fans love, like, every time any other team on planet Earth does it. I know there's a million Arsenal fans on Twitter going, "Oh, look what happened when we did it," and it's like, okay, I kind of have to sympathize with them, you know.
It's the consistency again. It's the lack of consistency, isn't it? Yeah. If they give that rule every time, then both managers aren't going to be there for most games.
No. But part of me was hoping that it was Ryan Mason's plan to get Stellini off the touchline so he could take over for the rest of the game. I think that's what I'm thinking and hoping it was, but I don't think it was.
No, I think that's a little bit too far-fetched. I mean, obviously,
love a conspiracy theory.
Oh yeah, I do. Not tonight. But obviously, talking about consistency and controversy, Becky, the one VAR decision that I think has shafted Brighton slightly is probably the Højbjerg challenge, because it was a little bit rough. If you rewatch it back.
Yeah, and pretty much since, you know, once we get to like half time and then we'd had the Welbeck opportunity, I was just constantly shouting, "Don't dive in, don't dive in, don't dive in, don't dive in, don't dive in." And then when we got like people like Tanganga on, it's like, "No, don't dive in." And then all of a sudden you just see that kind of the way Højbjerg does this, doesn't he? And you know, again, it wasn't. They should have had a penalty for it. There is contact. You know, I watched the Liverpool game yesterday in terms of the penalty. That I've watched the Wrexham game today. I can remember penalties that Kane's had, you know, the Romero one on Monday. You don't need a lot of contact for them to go down for it to be a penalty. So there was contact. He did, whether it was accidental or not. Yeah, I think if that had been given as a penalty, you probably would have thought that was fair. But it didn't.
And that's the thing, because then the reffing board come out the day after and say, oh yeah, we've made a mistake. But Jay, there's no point apologising. I know it's gone in our favour this week, but that could have been us on the receiving end. What is going to change for this to stop happening and us having to keep talking about it?
Sorry, I've got something in my eye. I'm not just like blinking a lot. No, well, funny enough, I was speaking to one of my family members this weekend, actually, and he lives in Scotland. He's a massive Celtic fan, and I wasn't aware that UEFA from next season are scrapping all of the Scottish referees, and UEFA are appointing and choosing the referees that do the Scotland games in the SPL next year.
Why is that?
Because of too many Celtic and Rangers ties with referees. It came out last year about one of the referees was out celebrating the day after Celtic beat all of this sort of stuff. Obviously, it's a lot more, but you know,
because I suppose it might be based on religion as well, mightn't it?
Well, exactly, it's all that kind of stuff. But I think for referees, the thing is, they're just not good enough. And you can see it and I know this sounds so daft, but you can see it from a grassroots level. Like even like playing Saturday League, the rules and the referees you get every week are so inconsistent, and none of them have played football. I'm sorry, 90% of referees have never played football in their lives. And I don't want to sound too horrible, but it's kind of true. And that's probably because they weren't good enough to play football. And it's like that's the only place on the field they could get. And you know, there's going to be loads of refs, if you put this out, Hollie, that are going to be gunning for me here that, you know, played semi-pro or whatever.
No, I think that's fair.
Do you know what I mean? It's like
I do think that's fair.
They don't know the game. And you know, Barry down the pub has normally got awful opinions, but 99% of the time, Barry down the pub knows more about football rules and what should be given as handball and offside.
The problem as well, I think, from the referees, but to defend them a little bit, is they changed the rules a fair bit. So my son he's 14, he's 15 next week, and he's a ref, and he says the same thing, that even when he's doing it, but it's the same for him. They seem to change the rules. He goes to his next meeting and there's a different rule, and there's a different. And to be fair to the refs, they have a lot that they've got to try and remember which rule is which. Yeah. The thing that I get with the referee thing is I don't necessarily what it does to help by apologising afterwards.
No,
you know, before Twitter, before all those sort of social medias, you'd go down the pub. You'd argue whether the decision was right or not. You'd have a bit of an argument with your mate. And then, like you said, next game, you'd kind of gone. It doesn't help that it's like psychoanalyzed for like weeks afterwards as well. But then to come out and apologise and say it's the wrong decision doesn't massively help, because there's nothing that can be done about it.
My question as well is on that point, and I'm kind of asking you, Becky and Hollie, what you think is, do you think VAR's got to the point now where it is just for spectacle? Because I would rather go back to, like you said, going to the pub and saying, oh, that ref's fixed it, or and then tomorrow I'd wake up fine and it'd just be like, oh, it's another.
Well, it's interesting watching today, because I watched the Wrexham Notts County game today. Yeah. So I live in Chester. Chester's like 20 minutes from Wrexham. I'm also from Shrewsbury originally. There's a big affinity to not liking Wrexham. So I watched the game, and you watch it with no VAR. And there was a constant offsides, and the linesman's flagging for offsides. And I even tweeted my friend and went, the linesman wants to be on telly. He's like waving his flag non-stop. But there's no VAR, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they even said at half-time that they were saying it was two or three of them weren't offside. And the guy on the surmising at half-time went, we don't want VAR in the conference and in the National League. We don't want it. Don't kind of be an advocate. We don't want it. So, yeah, I think people were like, it's either the technology, and there was one yesterday, wasn't it? Somebody was offside. Yeah, Ayew, wasn't it, for Palace? And he was clearly onside, and you could see with your eyes he was onside. Still took them forever to decide that he was onside, and they got the lines out, and you're like, but actually by eye, that one looks onside. So is it the humans operating the VAR, or is it the VAR that's not right? But it just takes forever, and you know, there, like I said, some go in your favour, some don't, and you'd hope there it could kind of do balance out, and there isn't anything else further. You know, there isn't anything behind big club, little club, and certain clubs and whatever. Which we could have a whole show just on that, couldn't we? Just
not wanting to Americanize our sport too much, because everyone knows I love my American sports, but you know, challenge flags, you get one VAR a game where you can, like you said, have that psycho-analyze decision where you go, right.
Works in cricket, doesn't it? They have the set amount in cricket, and you have a set amount in tennis. Tennis, you know,
one and a half, I think.
Started, there's lots of things. Yeah, they've not learn from all the other sports that have been mechanised. That's the thing I think about football. They've not learned from other sports that have done it well.
And that's the thing, Jay, going back to your point about how it's kind of dramatising it. Football's already dramatised. We don't need this added bit of, let's wait 5 minutes to decide whether it is onside, offside. If you can nakedly see it with your eyeball, then it's fine, just leave it. So
or stick with it on-field decisions. I think almost the sort of linesmen now are like, well, I won't flag, certainly in the Premier League, I won't flag for an offside because VAR is going to check it anyway. Whereas when you watch it in leagues that don't have it, the linesman still has to do things because they know they haven't got VAR to fall back on. So it's not helped that side either, because the officials can just think, well, I'm not going to give that for a foul because it's going to be checked for a red card, or I won't check if that's handball because it'll get checked. Do you see what I mean? It's almost like if they said that there were a certain amount that were going to go with the on-field decision, then the referee would know that there's 5 that I can give or not for each team that's going to be an on-field decision or not. It that side of it as well. You get an element of, well, that's taking it away from the referee because the VAR is going to do it, whether it's right or wrong. Whereas in other sports, like I said, to cricket, you go with umpire's call, and there are things where the on-field decision is sort of taken into consideration, and that side of it's gone a little bit as well. I don't think that's helped.
No, definitely. I feel like you say, there's been too much premise on VAR being the main decider these days, which is really bizarre. But no, it's interesting to get your takes on how we should change it, because I think it does need changing slightly, because it's just not working, because we end up, rather than talking about the football, we end up talking about the controversy that's been caused by
like
VAR.
I said earlier, we don't get loads in our favour, so it's not like we sit here every week and go, and yet we get them. We don't. Spurs very rarely benefit from VAR, so I was like, we would do some luck. We had some luck.
Indeed, that's the best way to put it. And Jay, saying about luck, I mean, obviously the whole Stellini thing in the conspiracy theory you were saying earlier meant that Mason was obviously in charge, which meant we actually got to see Danjuma free. So with that being said, what do you make of Danjuma? And do you think if Stellini was still on the touchline, would he have got on?
Well, you see free Danjuma trending every week on Twitter. And I'm just feeding into a conspiracy theory here, guys. But, Stellini goes, Mason is in charge, and Danjuma comes on, and instant impact. I just want to give a huge shout out, because I know a lot of, obviously in Milan, it cost us, but that goal is proves exactly why Christian Romero is a star-studded defender, in my opinion. He does commit a lot, but that goal doesn't happen if he doesn't commit to that challenge in the middle of the park. He travels a good 10 yards to make that tackle. Danjuma pulled 2 defenders away, and of course Harry's there. But I just think I'd love, I know it's so difficult in today's day and age to know whether players are being genuine or not. And going back to what Becky said at the beginning about players and posting on socials and stuff, part of you wants to feel like it's the player doing it, and that it's their social media team 9 times out of 10. But the guy's done nothing wrong. He's done nothing wrong to anyone. He's not come on and been awful. He's not not been
injured.
No, not been injured. Exactly. He's not done anything. Obviously Richarlison's got a little bit of an attitude problem in the past, and maybe you can understand that a little bit more. But even so, he's still not done. He's not scored, but in the league. But it just, I don't know what he's done wrong, and I think that's the frustration we all see as fans. It's like we said at the beginning. What does it take to change?
But also because he's when he scores immediately, like you said, he made an instant impact on Saturday, and he made an instant impact at the Preston game. That's the thing that's weird. He seems, he did so well in the Champions League. He scored in the Champions League, and then comes to us, and he was so close to going to Everton. And I was saying this to my friend. I was like, I wonder what he thinks about all of that. He'd got so much game time for Everton.
It is really sus, and I think that's the most annoying thing, because for the goal, Becky, obviously we've spoken about it a little bit with Jay, that the fact that he does manage to drag those defenders away to give so much space for Højbjerg to not muck his pass up this time. It
was a great pre-assist from Sonny as well. Sonny kind of nutmegs the guy, doesn't he? And then Højbjerg's there. Obviously Kulusevski's gone off for Danjuma. And there's been times, I can remember the Frankfurt game when Højbjerg assisted for Sonny when he did that kind of volley in the North Stand. Højbjerg does get himself into some quite good positions. There were times when he passed, I remember, for some of Bentancur's goals against Leeds and games like that. So he's such a Marmite figure, Højbjerg. Like I said, we were talking about the penalty, and I remember there was a time where he's lost the ball umpteen times this season. Sheffield United, he didn't make the tackle. There's lots of them. And then there's a situation where, like on Saturday, he's there, he makes a great pass to Kane, and Kane's like running, and I looked at Kane and I was like, oh, this is going on target at the very least. And obviously he like breaks the net. But to do that with that technique and that pace and that speed, because he'd had that one slightly before where him and Sonny had some interplay and he kind of hit it over, and you were starting to think, oh, is it not going to be his day? He doesn't need a second chance. Great pass, great goal. And I always say that when Kane scores a second goal for Spurs, you see the emotion in his face of how important that second goal is. And you can see it, and then Perisic pulls him down and there's like a big melee. But yeah, it was a great goal, and you could just see the Brighton's players' heads drop, thinking that, it just wasn't going to be their day. And like I said, we had some luck. But it's just a shame because that kind of goal was the sort of goal we scored last year, and snippets of this year, like at Leicester and Everton. Why can't we play like that all the time? So hopefully they're starting to see that, like I said, with Sonny playing a slightly different position, we had Danjuma, but like you said, it does come from the back, and we go right back to Luis. If defense is shaky, goalkeeper shaky, it has an impact. Romero makes that kind of interception, and then we're away.
Definitely. And that's the thing. I think the fact that, like you said, there's just snippets of great play. It just never is consistent. And it's the same with Spurs week in, week out. And obviously we did manage to get all 3 points, which was lovely, because I couldn't take another Everton kind of game, because that was obviously, that felt like a defeat. And it's felt like a defeat to most people. But obviously, before we get on to Bournemouth talk, I want to talk about managers, because obviously that is not the in thing, but it is what's on everybody's lips at the moment, because that is kind of the vibe at the minute. Now, there's a long list of managers, but I want to pin it down to 3, and that is obviously Poch, Nagelsmann, and Rodgers, as Wes probably is watching this and be bigging up Rodgers as he's the one he wants in, which is a madness. But Becky, I'll come to you first. Who for you would be the manager you'd like to come in to Tottenham in the summer?
It's interesting then, you didn't say Potter and you didn't say De Zerbi, so there's almost like with like each passing day there seems to be like a different sort of option. And I remember last week I was tweeting saying that when Nagelsmann was saying he wanted to wait to see if in the Champions League, and then the whole kind of sacking of Potter, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's met the players and he's manager the day after, which as yet hasn't happened. The problem with me is I'm the worst person to ask this question, because I don't know enough about other players, other managers. I've always said that I obviously know about Pochettino. It was very obvious a fair portion of the stadium was singing his name on Saturday. They were singing it at Everton. They were singing it less at Wolves. They were singing it less at Southampton. It was quite more. And it's a funny one, Brighton, because there were quite a lot of people I know that didn't go to the game on Brighton. They gave away their tickets. They put them on the ticket exchange. So there were a lot more kids there. And don't get me wrong, I have no issue with that. But they're not necessarily your season ticket holders who go every week. Now, I said this to my husband this afternoon. A lot of the people who are kind of members who can get tickets sort of on games when they're on the ticket exchange were probably supporters around the Wembley Poch kind of time, because they were the sort of matches where you could get to Wembley because of the capacity. And you would think a fair chunk of those would have been in the stadium on Saturday. So possibly that's why the Pochettino songs were louder. Because like I said, I know certainly a lot of season ticket holders weren't there. But yeah, it was a lot of people singing for him. We just, watching Brighton, we want to play like Brighton. And we could get that with De Zerbi. But if he's not going to come, we would get that with Poch. And I've had this discussion with numerous people about how you don't go back to your ex. And, he's not going to, he said he's got a nice stadium and no furniture and all of that. But you would hope that he would come back with a bit more experience to say, I was manager through Wembley, through the, demolishing of White Hart Lane, having no sign-ins for 2 summers. And things have moved on. We had lockdown in between, and now we've got a stadium that, they can fill every week. And he would come back and say, I'm going to sign, I'll join, but I want this, and this. And we go from there. And, like I said, I would like to see that kind of style of play. You just want to fall in love with Spurs again. That's the thing. We've lost that kind of connection with, really eagerly and looking forward to matches and enjoying being there. It's all now about the people and the experience when you go. And Poch would bring that back. We'd have the fist pumping, we'd have the hugging, we'd have the bringing in, sort of some of the players that aren't really playing for whatever reason. And you just hope that would come back. So it's Poch for me, but that's only because I know nothing about the others. And if they came in and they did a great job, then all the fine. That's fine too.
And I think that's the thing. I think I'm going to get to Jay in a minute, but I think, like you said, I'm kind of the same with managers in terms of I don't necessarily know much about them. And like you said, Poch is probably the only person I do know a lot about. But Jay, I'm going to let you take the floor because I'm going to try and sit here and not giggle as you talk.
Becky's not seen the previous episodes I've been on this topic. No, I do understand the fan base's need and want for Ponch to be back. I do agree. It is the most I've ever enjoyed watching Tottenham ever in my whole life. And he's given me some of the best moments that I have as a Spurs fan. However, I am going to stick true to. You said the analogy of, don't go back to your ex. Well, if we were to, in this scenario, say that, you're going back to your ex and they've still got exactly the same tendencies that they had before, in the sense of he's coming back. He's still got Dyer. He's still got Sanchez. He's still got Ben Davies. He's still got Lloris. He's still got all of these players that he had when he left. You're not just taking your ex back. You're taking they're moving all their stuff back in again, because it never left. You broke up with your ex, but you kept a picture of them on the wall. And this has always been my gripe with the Pochettino talk is we sacked him, the club sacked him, but the fans never sacked him ever, in my opinion. He's never been sacked, and that sounds like I'm defending him, but I'm actually saying it's kind of how, as a fan base, can we move forward if we've always got the picture of him on the wall, and the team he's going to inherit isn't much different to the team that he left, in my opinion. Obviously that it's probably worse off. And seeing how he did with PSG, the only objective was winning the Champions League. He had Lionel Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar, massive characters, huge characters. And he actually didn't win the league in France, which is, he did win the league, but he actually lost one of the seasons he was there, the title. That's unheard of. I don't think he comes back a better manager, if I'm honest. If I can disagree there, I don't think he'll come back a better manager. I do think it would be a nostalgia thing. But also with the same thing as what Becky said at the end about if another manager came in, and I've said this a million times, if Pochettino comes back, I will be the first person to eat my hat if we win a trophy. I'll be the first person on Twitter to publicly apologise about everything I've ever said about him coming back. Because, I'm not saying, because I want my club to succeed, and I want whichever manager to come in to succeed, whether I hate him or not. I don't hate him, but whether I dislike him or dislike what he's in my
because that we were stretched with Mourinho, weren't we? We've had Conte to less extent. He was less sort of Chelsea, but with Mourinho, I remember thinking, oh, hello, is this really the best thing? But it's okay, we'll go with it. And then we had lockdown, and he had to deal with every lockdown, and you're like, yeah, we'll do, we'll support them as much as we can, despite maybe kind of our second best, kind of thoughts to it. But yeah, I feel like we've kind of gone with the managers that they thought would be win now managers, and that's not worked. So we do need somebody that is going to bring players on. I don't think Nagelsmann is necessarily the right choice.
No.
For that, we've tried it and it didn't work.
See for me, my question is to Spurs fans, and obviously being one, I knew she'd be in here as soon as this topic came up. But my question to Spurs fans is we've had these win now managers, and nothing's happened, and we've not won anything. So my question is if we get a project manager, have we got the patience as a fan base to stick by them? That's my question. If the football's
better, I really think we do.
But I think there's a big swathe of Spurs fans that want to win. There's a lot of Spurs fans that want to win. Under Jose Mourinho, I did not care how we won. I wanted to win. And I'm not saying, nice football is nice football, but Brighton played the nicest football I've seen against us this season, and they lost to one of the worst Spurs teams I've seen in my life. Now, do I want that every week? Probably not. For me, I want someone who plays positive football. I totally agree. I don't like it. I don't enjoy watching Conte, and I don't enjoy watching Jose Mourinho, but the whole time it gets results, I don't mind. And I do agree that, yes, it would be nice to play nice football and be amazing. But
we're not.
yeah, for me, the choice I wanted, and I think has been dismissed, is Luis Enrique, because he's got experience of playing really nice football. Spain, and again, this is totally going to bite me in the ass because they did get knocked out of the World Cup. But Spain were one of my favorite teams to watch in the World Cup. I know they play without a striker, so that's a bit weird for us. But he was nice football, experienced winner. But then I would think that if we do go for a project manager, I don't want to reject. This is the thing. You don't want to reject. You want someone that's not been sacked. You want we want to go out and be proactive and go, right, this team's doing really well. They're playing really nice football. We're going to take their manager from them. Not, he's been sacked. Let's pick him up.
The stumbling point with that is any compensation that's paid, isn't it? I don't want to get into
goes to higher ups, doesn't it?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I don't want to get into all of that. But
we'll be here for hours.
Yeah, exactly. If their business model is to not pay compensation where possible, then that kind of rules out every manager that's currently in a job.
And I think that's the difficult thing. I think obviously living with Jay, he's not indoctrinated me not to want Poch back, but every time he drip feeds me it. But it is true in a sense that
I just think the rumors aren't going away. No. I've heard things since, and I've heard things before. I've heard things today. They just don't seem to go away. We've had managers where they've gone, no, he doesn't want to come. That was the Sporting Lisbon manager, I think, wasn't it? And it doesn't seem to go away. And now whether that is because the season ticket renewals are up, that's why the Maddison rumours have come out, the cynic in me. But it doesn't seem to be being put to bed, and that's why it's continuing.
I said this on Twitter the other day, and I've always been very vocal on my opinions on it. But I actually caved in the other day, and I said, look, bring him back, do it, and either one or two things happened. We get him back, and absolutely nothing's changed, and people like me will go on every podcast on planet Earth saying I told you so, or get him back, we win a trophy, and I have to go on every podcast and say you guys were right. He has. But
changed. You're right though, because he said he wants to return. There is always that, isn't there? And that, I completely agree with that. It's almost like until he's done that, that will always be. Even if we get a manager in, and we start having a run of games where we don't play well, people are like, we should have got Poch back. Until he actually turns around and says, I'm not coming back, or I'm not coming back till this time, or it will continue to happen. Because he didn't go to United, and he's not so far gone to Chelsea, and unless he's going to Real Madrid, and unless he comes out and says he's not coming back, or he comes back and it's got disaster, and then we never ask for it again. I do think it has to be one of those two things, otherwise it will constantly keep coming back because he said that he would like to return one day, and that's the trouble.
It's got to be it's got to be exactly what's the picture's got to come off the wall of him if he comes back and doesn't succeed.
Yeah, and that's it. He gets one more chance, and that's it. I completely agree. If he came back, you're not having like third or fourth time. One time, yeah, exactly. I completely get that. But because he said that he would come back, until he does, it will always get brought up.
And it's always hung over our heads, no matter what happens. And I can't think that's probably the best way to go. Just bring him back now, see how it goes, and then that's it, done, dusted. But like I said, I don't think we'll ever get it out of the way until he does come back. But before we go, I do want to quickly talk about Bournemouth, because obviously we do play them on Saturday, and it does mean, Becky, that we will have Mason in charge. So with that in your thoughts, how do you think it's going to go down?
Oh, who knows? There is arguments that we won the game, so he starts with the same team. Son scored, it means you assume he wasn't, unless he's maybe going to change Kulusevski for Danjuma, because when Danjuma came on, he went on to the opposite side and Sonny played. So there is that. There is that sort of idea that you keep a settled side. We haven't got any suspensions, so Romero, is still there and all that sort of stuff. So I could see it being the same team. You just hope that possibly tactics will be slightly different. Or Bournemouth are a poor side. However, because again we invite all teams onto us. They went 2-0 up, didn't they, last time, and it was the Bentancur show, and we haven't got Bentancur this time. So we don't. I said this earlier. We've got. Everyone keeps saying we've got a better running than other teams around us, but we don't perform against the so-called worst teams. So there's just no way of saying, we should beat Bournemouth at home. We're always better at home. We play better at home. We should beat Bournemouth easily.
We should, especially with them in 15th as well. But like you said, Becky, we're so inconsistent. Who knows anymore? I mean, Jay, they obviously managed to beat Fulham and Leicester, but they lost to Brighton. So with that in mind, you're kind of hoping to yourself, this should be an okay game.
Yeah, it should be. And Fulham have lost their last 4. So, Fulham have been amazing this season. And I think people have still got it in the back of their heads. When you say Fulham, you're thinking of the Fulham that are playing really well. But Fulham aren't playing well at the minute.
No, they've run out of steam, I think.
Yeah. And a lot of teams do that towards the end of the season, and you say about the easy run-in. If you're playing anyone from 15th and below in the last 8, or is it 8 left? Is it 8 left? 8 now?
Yep.
No? 8, yeah. Like that, if you're playing anyone in the bottom 15, in the below 15th, with the last couple of games to go, that isn't an easy run, and that's why, not to bring them up, but I think Arsenal have got a very difficult run because they play teams in the top 6 and they play teams below the top 15, below 15th, and games like Bournemouth are going to be games that we're going to have to win, and that's what Brighton was at the weekend. It's a game that if we want to be a Champions League football, we have to win. We have to beat them.
Definitely. And I think, like we've kind of said, like you said as well, Becky, the fact that it's at home is probably the only saving grace in that kind of sense. Because like you say, we do perform better at home.
Newcastle could be carnage. Liverpool could be carnage. United's not going to be easy. Villa are on form. We've got Villa away. We haven't got an easy run in. We might have one of the paper, but there are some tricky matches. We've got Palace. Palace are a bit inconsistent. There are some. The last 8 games are not straightforward. And then we've got Leeds last game of the season, who you would think would still be in it. The bottom sort of 8 teams are so poor that they're all out beating each other. It's a really tricky one. But yeah, I noticed that we've had a good run of form at home. We are better at home. Hopefully that's what happens on Saturday.
The thing is as well is that, if we don't, 3 points against Bournemouth, just looking at the fixtures now, 3 points against Bournemouth. And then if you're a optimistic Spurs fan, Newcastle, United, Liverpool, all in a row. Like, how many points? Yeah, how many points are we going to get out of that? 1 win, maybe, if we're lucky. But I don't see, Liverpool at Anfield though, is always, but I just.
Then Villa away after that.
We've got to win. We've got to win.
It's going to be a rough run-in, to say the least. There's no point pinning our hopes on
That's
things.
why when you go back to like Everton, Southampton, Wolves, I know we weren't winning at Wolves, but there's some missed opportunities there. We can hope for results against United and Newcastle if we do raise our game. But what a waste those matches were, that we shouldn't be in this situation. Yes, we've stretched a 6-point lead above the teams below us, but we're now, they're getting away from us. And if they beat us in those matches, then we won't catch them. And it's such a shame, really.
And that's the most annoying thing. And I feel like there's a theme every season that we talk about this. It always comes down to the last couple of games and we always try and scrap it right at the end. And I feel like with those missed opportunities, like the Southampton game, there were games we should have picked away with 3 points. But again, we've shot ourselves in the foot. But hopefully come the weekends, we get the business done against Bournemouth. And then next Monday, we can dissect it all again on Hollie's Hotspurs Live. But a big thank you to you guys tonight for joining me. So we'll go around the table and we'll say our goodbyes. First of all, Becky, thank you so much again for joining us. It was a nice dissection of the game and more, because I think it needed to be done.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you. Where can everybody find you?
I'm Tuesday podcast. I'm a guest on there. I'm on tonight at 9. But in the stadium, if you see me in the stadium, give me a wave, or I'm on Twitter. Always like to chat. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you, Becky. And Jay, thank you again for coming in and helping me out. So how are you and where can everybody find you?
You can always find me on Twitter, normally winding people up and raising anti-Pochettino propaganda. But you can find me on Twitter and Twitch and stuff. But normally the super sub. I try and keep my opinions to myself where I can. But when I have the chance when I have the chance to express them myself, I don't mind. So yeah.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, Jay. And thank you to everybody else that's been in the chat. You've been a lively bunch tonight. And thank you to Catman Jess as well for your super chat this evening. Like I said, Hollie's Hotspurs Live will be back next Monday with new guests. Keep your eyes peeled for who those are, because it should be another good show. And until next time, like we always say, come on, you Spurs.